Hey, do you have an overview of the biodiversity topics within the CSRD? In this podcast episode, I'm going to talk to Philippe, who worked at WWF and helped EFRAG to develop the E4 of the ESRS, so the biodiversity topic. And in this episode, he's going to share some insights about it. Enjoy. Hey, Philippe. And first of all, thank you so much for your time. For those of the listeners that don't know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the invitation. I've worked in the field, or I guess sustainability for, I suppose, around about 15 years, quite a while outside of Europe in Kuwait, the MENA region, Morocco, Mexico. And the last few years based in Germany, but increasingly focused on EU regulation. I got into EU regulation, in particular the the CSRD and the ESRS, via my work for the WWF, whom I left late last year. So now I'm acting as a freelancer, but I'm still involved in the development and sort of implementation also of the European Sustainability Reporting Standards via my role and side of the Sustainability Reporting Technical Expert Group, SRTech, usually very long words for short acronyms, but better to spell them out. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds super interesting. And for me, like from my understanding, this means that you're working with EFRAG, or how exactly is the combination there? What is the right term?
Well, I'm nominated as an expert there inside the technical expert group. So the nomination is for the person only. It's not related to an organization, but you would still sort of need organizational backing to make it in there, to have a successful application. It's formally it's not tied, but informally you can say there's a connection. Whatever I say, I just share my own views here with you, as well as whenever I speak at EFRAG inside the technical expert group and my function there. So I've basically gone on the ticket of biodiversity, nature-related reporting, because there's a sort of a bit of a lack of knowledge expertise years ago, but up to this date, including in the application EFRAG receives for the expert groups they have.
Okay. So this means that you consulted EFRAG with the biodiversity topics of the ESRS?
In a way, yes. I replaced a colleague from the WWF 3 years ago during the time of the project task force, and then when we EFRAG basically released the results of what was developed inside EFRAG as the results in the sense of the proposals for the European Sustainability Reporting Standards for the public consultation. There was also a switch in the structure, the governance structure of EFRAG from the project task force to the new structure, the second pillar, the sustainability reporting pillar. And most of the people actually left. So I was one of the only ones that stayed on, and then was actually put in charge sort of on behalf of the EFRAG Secretariat as a WWF employee to support the finalization, like onboarding the comments from the public consultation and support the finalization of the ESRS E4 and what was then in late 2022 submitted to the European Commission as a final proposal from EFRAG, which was then still modified by the Commission, but largely remained intact of what was then published as a delegated act.
Okay. So I think because of all of this, what you just shared with your experience, I feel like you're the perfect person to like talk to the E4 part of the ESRS, so the whole biodiversity topic. But maybe to get everybody on the same page, can you quickly explain the different topics, like how does the E4 fit into the whole picture of the ESRS, and what are the different topics that one needs to know to then know what actually is the topic we are focusing on right now?
So how E4 fits into the wider perspective of sustainability? I mean,
And And then, also with the ESRS, with
Yes,
the
yes.
structure and how it's built up.
I mean, first of all, we need to ask ourselves what was the purpose of the CSRD and what was the purpose of the ESRS. We had the NFRD, we already had legislation out there that was supposed to get out non-financial data into the public realm. It didn't really work very well, and I think one of the reasons was it was too open, too vague. So now the idea was, okay, we need comparable information, we need more rigidity, so we need standards, right? So as GI had developed standards for a while, we need European standards that ended up being built largely on top of GI and what was already out there. And that included a number of structural elements. So first of all, you have the sector agnostic standards, which was what was put out by the European Commission last year, that apply to all sectors. And these contain sector cross-cutting standards, which apply above, or they are topic agnostic, so to say. So they're sector agnostic, but also topic agnostic. And this is the ESRS 1, which provides some general ideas, principles on what is this, what are the ESRS about, how they're supposed to be written, what kind of the quality of the information being input, how is that supposed to look like. And then ESRS 2, which then provides already the first disclosure requirements, including on the risk management of the firm, including on the business model, and so on and so forth. And the topical standards, of which ESRS E4 is a part, is 1 out of 10, build up on ESRS 2 to an extent, and then add additional disclosure requirements. So when ESRS 2 is asking you to identify the material impacts, risks, and opportunities for your firm, the topical standards build on top of that by providing additional data points related to these disclosure requirements in ESRS 2, by asking, okay, you had topic agnostic disclosure requirements on your material IROs. In IROs are impacts, risks, and opportunities in ESRS 2, and now in E4, you have an additional data point, basically an additional question, asking, okay, when you conduct your materiality assessment as per ESRS 2, what, how material do you think is deforestation for you, a land use change, and so on and so forth. So the standards are connected and they build on top of each other, and the topical standards have a central role in that sense, as they, like I said, are built on the cross-cutting standards and then build the basis for the sector-specific standards, because in the sector-specific standards, they're sort of built on top of the set 1, which includes both the cross-cutting standards and the topic-specific standards, in that they then provide additional detail for, let's say, the oil and gas sector, when you have, for example, the general topic of land use change or deforestation, or let's take a different example. Let's take the agriculture sector, right? You can then, in the sector-specific standards for agriculture, look deeper into, okay, the supply chain of soy or some kind of raw materials that could cause land use change, and ask more specific questions. So you have a number of standards that build on top of each other, and whatever is not covered as a topic or data point in the standards that are put out or proposed by EFRAG and published by the European Commission as legislation, but is still identified as a material topic. It could be, let's say, PFAS. Let's say it's not mentioned in the ESRS, but it's still a material topic for you as a company. That would have to be reported as an entity-specific disclosure. So in the end, if you have the sector-specific standards or not, it doesn't really matter, since in theory, at least, I know in practice is different, but in theory, it should be the same result.
Okay. Very interesting. And thank you for like painting the picture so that we know like where exactly we stand when we talk about the E4. So let's talk about the biodiversity topic a little bit more. Like maybe can we start with the objectives of the E4 topic? Like what is it actually about?
Yeah. Perhaps just one step back once more, simply because the E4 what is the E4 looking at? It's biodiversity and ecosystems. So what are biodiversity and ecosystems? It's nature, right? It's the state of nature. So if you look at the other topical standards, you have E1 climate change, you have E2 pollution, you have E3 with water and marine resources, and these are sort of all impact drivers of nature loss, minus sort of E3, which you can also say relates to an extent to the state of nature. And E5 is sort of the business response. So the E4 standard is actually the foundation of the environmental standards. E4 should have been the E1. So that's a bit of a conceptual, I'd say, misalignment, because all priority is always being given to climate. But E4 is so important since it's looking at nature itself, and it has very important elements in it, in that it tries to understand, okay, how do you impact nature in general? What is your contribution to land use change, right? So this is also a very direct impact that's covered under E4. So it's trying to get at, your direct impacts on nature. By the E4 standards, and it introduces very interesting concepts like the planetary boundaries, ecological thresholds. For biodiversity in particular, this is still a bit tricky to report on, to understand, since methodologies are still evolving, but it's a bit like a chicken and the egg, what do you start with? And I think we chose, let's say, the chicken with the E4, just to throw something out, and the response will evolve. So there's more pressure now on to see SBTN, for example, succeed, the Science-Based Targets for Nature, to be able to put out methodology that enables you to set science-based targets on biodiversity. On climate, we have them. On water, we have them, and so on and so forth. On biodiversity, they're still working on it.
Okay. Okay, so completely understood, and I loved your passion about like the biodiversity part. And if we like look a little bit more into this, or maybe from like the company perspective, like what are the different objectives that are within the E4 standard and that companies then need to look at?
I mean, the disclosure requirements, you mean? What they're asked to publish? Yes.
Yes.
And what that does to the firm, right? So first of all, the topic is on the table, right? So there were calls very early on in 2022 to get rid of E4, to put it at the sector specific layer, and there could have been 4 environmental standards. It was very close, and no E4. Yet, what we know from the World Economic Forum, I think there's a gross underestimation, but there's a 2/3 or so of gross global GDP, or I don't recall exactly the measure they took, but about 2/3 of global activity is related or medium or significantly dependent on ecosystem services. And that's basically companies that are dependent. Yet, when you look at the materiality assessment, there was a study done by the Environment Agency in Germany 2 or 3 years ago. The results of the materiality assessment sort of indicate that it's not really material, not important for firms, since only 1% reports on them. So that the fact that this standard exists, that the topic is on the table for companies like the sustainability manager, for boards to actually look at, that it forces them to think about it, that it forces a conversation with the auditor. That in itself is already a major achievement, and it enables firms to, or the sustainability manager in a way that has been maybe going on for 5-10 years, saying, look, we have a problem with land use change, or we are causing insects to, evaporate because of the products we use. That is actually helping them to have that conversation internally. And then firms can, like, from the inside perspective of firms, it's of course impacts are what civil society actors like me care most about, that are reduced by firms. But then again, there's also a significant value for firms themselves, because they depend on those ecosystem services that the World Economic Forum sketched out, and they usually don't know. So if they don't know, they have risks across their supply chains that they have no idea about. And that's what's usually the case, especially regarding water risks, regarding, I mean, freshwater risk, but risk of flooding, or even mangroves, right? So, or hilltop sliding off, or you can imagine all sorts of physical, non-physical risks related to biodiversity, agriculture firms, depending on pollination. The list is endless, right? But it's both poorly understood inside of firms from the real economy, and at an aggregate, as a consequence, also very poorly understood at the financial sector level, which owns portfolios with a lot of individual firms in. So we really don't know what the risks are related to biodiversity in nature. And ESRS E4 can, I think, get us a bit closer to understanding that. Since that's my last point on that, I think it's a gross underestimate to say it's 60% that is dependent. I think we are 100% part of nature and 100% dependent on ecosystem services. And there's cascade effects, right? So you can't just isolate one sector saying, okay, if all the bees die, then that happens. I mean, it has impacts across the whole economy, indirectly at least.
Yeah. I love how you have like a very clear view on like the disclosure requirements and why it's important for companies to look at this and like then to disclose all of this. And on the other side, I talked to sustainability manager, and of course, like for them, it's a lot of work to do, and they like lose a little bit the overview
Yeah.
of everything. So maybe how can we like build a bridge between like the two views that are out there? Can you like explain a little bit to me? And I know like we don't have to dive into and like talk about every disclosure requirement, but maybe can you give some examples of like what is specifically asked in the E4 part and how this relates then to larger topics? I know
Mm.
that you already gave a couple of like examples, but I would like to visualize a little bit more that the sustainability managers
Yeah.
just see the jungle of disclosure requirements and then like how it can actually lead to like something very
Well, you
beneficial.
just said jungle of disclosure requirements. I'm not going to nail you on it, but I think that the structure of each topical standard is actually quite clear. You start with the materiality assessment. You try to identify, right, what are the most important impacts I have, and risk and opportunities I'm subject to. And based on that, and only based on those, you are then asked to say, okay, do you have policies? Do you have measures in place to implement your targets, to do something on your policies that you have? Let's say zero deforestation, right? Or let's say you identified that in your supply chain, you're massively contributing to deforestation because you procure, let's say, soy for your animal feed for pig farms across Europe. So first you identify that this is a risk in terms of, or this is an impact because it causes deforestation, but it's also a risk because, oh my God, I could face lawsuits, I don't know, possibly via other pieces of legislation like the EUDR, and so on and so forth. And then, so you first identified it as a material topic, and then you are asked to, in the topical standards, okay, describe the policy you have in place, if you have any. If you have one, here are the data points against which you have to report on that policy. If you don't have a policy against a material impact, and could be an impact and a risk, then just say so. Then it's easier for you to report, but your stakeholders might not like it. And it's the same principle with, okay, you have a policy, great, nice to know. Do you have measures in place to, let's say, reduce that deforestation risk? Well, no. Okay, just say so. Or yes, and then you're asked to avoid the greenwashing, to be a bit more precise on what you're actually doing. Because historically we've heard, okay, we have the problem, we do all the things and we're done. It's easy. Yeah, it's so granular. Some of the disclosure requirements and data points, because the ESRS aren't designed for the good ones out there, right? For the front runners. There's not too many front runners, first of all. And secondly, we need everyone to be on board. We need a level playing field, and hence they need to be granular because there's a lot of them also trying to cut corners. And then going back to the structure, it's the same on targets, right? So what kind of targets you have in place? And that structure was slightly different, but then EFRAG had to change course to align with TCFD and the TNFD structure, the way the disclosure requirements are ordered. Not ideal, I would say, but it is what it is. And yeah, you have it now.
Yeah. Maybe just 2 sentences about this. Could you quickly explain what the TCFD and the TNFD is, just so people
Yes.
people that might not be familiar with
Well,
it?
the TCFD is the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. It was sort of set up to provide financial market participants through the, and here we are now talking about materiality perspective, for the financial materiality perspective, with information on what kind of risk and opportunities are in their portfolios, and hence firms need to report that. But what risk and opportunities are at an aggregate level at their portfolios, so that they would need to take action to minimize those risks and opportunities. And the hope was, which I explicitly don't share, that by financial market participants seeing risk and opportunities, somehow there would be capital shifted and we would get the transition towards a sustainable economy going. I don't share that simply because, to me, taking the financial materiality lens is inherently reactive, whereas if you look at impact, it's proactive. So we can't really afford for risks to appear and then get out of hand before action is done. We need to do that before risks even for the financial market emerge, and reduce and minimize impacts at the start. Yeah, so TNFD is modeled after TCFD. It's the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. It's also rather looking to cater to financial market actors. Again, let's say I have mixed feelings about that, also the governance structure, but this is very important. The LEAP approach, the locate, evaluate, assess, and prepare approach they put out, was designed to be compatible with the ESRS and also to be compatible with impact reporting. So that's actually a very, very solid methodology they put out. Of course, it can still be improved and always be improved, but this is actually quite good piece that can help you or your viewers who are dealing with preparing the reports, actually, in providing a sort of step-by-step guide on how to prepare your disclosures. LEAP is specifically referenced. The LEAP approach is specifically referenced in the ESRS, in I think E2 to E5, if I'm not completely mistaken.
Okay. Okay. Also, looking at the time, I have one more question I would like to ask you. Because I get a lot of questions from sustainability managers that ask me for like free templates or some automation or some help to like make the work easier for them. Because as I said before, with the jungle, like they see it as like very confusing and they just want it easier and faster and quicker. Do you have any tips and recommendation that you can share that I can share then further on to those sustainability managers?
Yes, I can, but before, I'd like to say something a bit more conceptual. I think that expectation that sustainability reporting is supposed to be magically easy, I don't think is justified. Financial reporting is not easy. It takes years. It takes years and a lot of sweat to actually get your whatever certificates you need, right? To chartered financial accountant, whatever. There's a lot of people even that fail those exams. So now having the expectations, I'm doing a 2-week sustainability reporting course and I'm understanding the ESRS and all the topics. Come on, that's a bit of a joke. Also because sustainability is more complex than just financial matters. Financial matters is one element, right, of life. In sustainability, you have human rights, you have biodiversity, you have climate. So my God. And I think the problem here comes in when firms expect one person, even like 500 employees, we have one person, please write us the report. They also generate financial data, whether they're listed or not. And it's usually not just one person that's involved. So I think there's a bit of a mismatch there. That being said, it can always be easier, right? And I think there's an important role here for governments to actually fund tools, provide funding to organizations that develop tools, like, for example, the WWF with the risk filter suite that includes the water risk filter, the biodiversity risk filter that you can look at for free. It helps you in the materiality assessment on biodiversity and water risks and impacts. You have Encore, which right at the start, before asking hundreds of thousands of stakeholders that provide you a lot of answers you can't really use, with a lifeline in terms of what is likely material for my sector with regards to nature-related impacts, risks and opportunities. Then, of course, you have the TNFD tools catalog, which provides you huge, I don't know how many, it's maybe hundreds of tools you could look into to find something that suits you and your specific situation. And there's also tools listed that cost something. IBAT, I forgot the full the spelling of IBAT now, but STAR is used, species threat abatement risk. You have tools like Kuyua that kind of combine everything here. Disclaimer: I supported them earlier this year. Nala as well. So there's a lot of startups, a lot of things happening. You should usually expect to pay something, but usually it's well worth the budget what you get back there. But yeah, things are still developing, and I suppose with demand and supply, and development costs being recouped and so on at some point, when enough organizations purchase these solutions, there will also be, relatively speaking, affordable prices for that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for your insights. I really like your clear view on like the sustainability and biodiversity topics. And for me, it definitely helped to like get another perspective on the whole thing. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. And I hope that we can talk very soon
Sure.
again.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
If you have come this far, thank you so much for listening to the AtlasZero podcast. Before you leave, I want to mention two more things. First, if you're looking for an ESG solution, we have a free search on our website. There, you have to answer around 10 questions about your company, and we will then filter our database and send you a list of solutions that might be the right one for you. This is by no means perfect, but it's meant to break the decision paralysis a lot of companies are experiencing and help you to get started easily. And second, and I have to ask this, please like and subscribe to the AtlasZero podcast. It helps us a lot to reach more people, and at the end of the day, our goal is to reach as many people as possible. So, thank you so much, and I hope to see you very soon.